I'm Alan Robarge, a relationship coach. Welcome to Improve Your Relationships, where I like to talk about attachment injuries and healing attachment trauma. And for this video, let's explore maturing and maturity, and to think about how we are designed as human beings. From day one, we are going through stages and chapters of development. We are evolving, and that developmental stages that we can successfully complete open us up to some new levels of developmental stages, in that life is always challenging and that we are always growing. Healing work, this idea of doing healing work, the need to heal, oftentimes can be reframed to think of it in terms of rewinding the clock a bit, going back, looking at perhaps some areas in your development, in your maturing process, how perhaps certain areas are lacking. The reason why I share this very specifically about relationships is that it's somewhat of an easy approach, an easy explanation for what is going on, what is happening when we are struggling in relationship, when there's relationship distress, when we're arguing with our partner, things are not going our way. We could say the relationship is unhealthy. We could say the relationship is dysfunctional. And then what happens to us when we are in that situation is that we respond. We're responding with whatever set of skills we have. We're responding with the tools that we have in our tool bag. And what we notice, and this is back to the sort of easy answer, a simple understanding and explanation for relationship struggle and relationship distress, is that in many of those moments, we are bumping up against our own immaturity. We're bumping up against the limitation of our skillfulness to manage the situation, to respond to the situation, and that we would have a limited approach, a limited awareness, because quite honestly, we have not done it differently. We don't have enough experiences that we would collectively say helped us evolve and grow, and that we have developed some more mature resources to manage our anxieties, to manage our distress, to manage conflict in relationship, to manage miscommunication. And since we don't have that level of maturity, and we don't have the resources and the skills to make it work, what that means is we default to what we know, which is going to be coming at a situation using our particular state of mind, or our level of logical thinking is going to be channeled through an immature understanding, this immature place. Now, there's something very interesting also about the mind and how the mind works, is that when we're in relationship and we are at our most challenged moments, and that when we feel we have the least amount of resource, we're disconnected from our current adult self, what happens is we seem to regress, or we default to this younger self. And that's why many of us, we often feel like we're coming from a place of behaving, like a 5-year-old behaving like a 10-year-old, whatever age you want to pick, acting like a teenager. It's not uncommon for us to be in the middle of an argument and you happen to catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror. Let's say you're arguing with your partner, and you decide to leave the room, and you pass in the hallway, you pass a mirror, and you see yourself, and you might have just this little mini moment where you're acting like a teenager. You know that you're arguing with your partner, and that you feel it really in your body, in your muscles, in your bones. Everything about you just feels like, I am a rebellious teenager, and I'm not getting my way, and I'm feeling a little bitchy about it, and I'm going to have an argument with you. And usually when we are most fearful, when we question if trust is being challenged, if a sense of safety and reassurance is being challenged, when that gets heightened, we generally don't default to our best self or our better self. We generally slide into our younger self. Perhaps, I don't quite, honestly know why that totally would be. One reason, perhaps, is because when it speaks to the degree of your trauma injury or the unresolved attachment trauma, that when you were in those previous situations of that same level of fear and mistrust and not having your emotional attunement needs, your emotional resonant needs were not being met in your history when you were 5, when you were 7, when you were 10, that there seems to be this, that the brain defaults to what it knows, and it just defaults to using the same old programming. So the way that you felt helpless, the way that you had a temper tantrum, the way that you shut down and felt completely rejected in your family, you felt ignored, you felt abandoned, you felt really angry, that misunderstood. It could be the feeling you did not feel secure, you just did not feel secure. A lack of security. So when we encounter as an adult, we're going through our life, this happens, that happens, this happens, and then something occurs, some trigger, some conflict, some situation that's going to trigger the same feeling state of when you were 5 or 7 or 10 or whatever age it is. And instead of being able to consciously say, hey, I'm a different person, I have different resources, I have a current mature self, I could activate my higher self and really attempt to stay present and stay skillful and to do this in a way that has intention, in the way that I didn't have, because just by right of my brain development, I did not have all of those resources or that level of maturity about me at age 5 or 7 or 10 or 12 or whatever it is. Instead of being able to retain awareness of our current adult self, we tap into the same level of disempowerment and that same level of imploding into not having choice, not having agency, not having clarity. I mean, that's a huge one. One way we know that we could use as a test or to observe how we get sucked into our immature younger self is this word confusion. Oftentimes, when we're experiencing high degrees of confusion, and even people when they're talking about their experience, they keep saying, I'm confused about what's going on. Oftentimes, what's happening is that's the byproduct or the fuzzy residue of disconnecting from our current adult resource. And that when we disconnect from our the tools in our tool bag, when we disconnect from our adult self, it invites a fuzzy, I like the word residue. It brings in this, things are just fuzzy around the edges and there's a confusion like, I don't understand, like what is going on here? I don't understand, I'm confused. And in many ways, we're entering this state of mind that we're calling our younger self, a younger age. So, what is the point of this video? Why am I sharing this? I'm assuming chances are you can relate, and many people watching this are going to be able to identify and say, oh yeah, that happened. I know what you're talking about. I do that, multiple times. So, it's in the spirit of encouragement, in the spirit of reworking, of creating new experiences so that we mature and grow, the message here is to really think about this word maturing and maturity. It's one thing to think about the word recovery, like I'm in recovery. There's one thing to think about the word, I'm wounded and I'm healing the wound. Another thing is to think about I have attachment trauma and attachment injuries and I need to heal and integrate the trauma. There's still an aspect of languaging it in those terms that are looking at it from the point of view that something is broken and something needs fixed. Sometimes it can be helpful to also look at it as the organic, natural process of maturing. And that you are called, you are challenged in your consciousness by right of your suffering, by right of your relationships not working out. Even the reason why you're probably watching this video is because you have relationship distress. I mean, that's why we're seeking answers. That's why we're seeking relief. We are in pain. And we're trying to work on the cessation of suffering. We're trying to work on, well, what skills do I need to help manage this pain? And then look at the bigger picture of, well, what's the context that's creating this pain? So one way to approach this, the point of this video is in the spirit of being a cheerleader and encouragement, is to say, well, you're maturing. This is about your maturity. And in order to do that, we have to be honest with ourselves and say, well, I'm immature. Now, we don't say that all the time, and that's not an identity. It's not like all of you is immature. We're not, when you're at work, you have your adult resources and you're mature. When you're in a crisis with the family, you have your adult resources and you're mature. When you're just, with friends, hanging out, living your life in general, for the most part, you're in your adult self and you're maturing, you are mature, you're operating these different levels of development. However, what we're not talking about, we're not creating a black or white. We're not taking an assessment, a test, assessing to say, yes, you're immature, no, you're mature, or yes, you're mature, no, you're immature. What we're saying is that within that continuum, when you're stressed out, when life is throwing you a curveball, when your partner is distancing and or you're perceiving that there's a distance, when there's some argument in your relationship, or in fact you have the relationship is stale and dead and over and you can't leave and you're stuck and you're lying to yourself that you should stay, that alone creates a lot of high anxiety and distress. So what we're noticing how we have the tendency to respond to that very edgy, prickly, discomfortable place of our suffering, the edge of our suffering. We have a tendency to want to get sucked into an immature, younger approach to managing those feelings. And the point of this video is to raise our consciousness and to say, well, we have to practice. We are choosing maturity. We are choosing to mature. We're choosing to think about, well, if I'm continuing to expand and grow and evolve, how can I possibly respond to this situation a little differently? How could I possibly respond to my internal feeling states a little differently? How can I give myself comfort when it hurts? How do I self-soothe those places that are really bent out of shape and in the moment feel inconsolable, as opposed to acting out? In some ways, an immature response might be immature logic. We might have immature thinking, but oftentimes it's an immature acting out. And at the core, that's also what's referred to as protest behavior. I want to be treated differently. I'm going to protest. Treat me differently. Maturing and maturity is to step back and take a bigger view of saying, well, what are the stages of development, not only as a child, but how can you, and some of what I'm saying, this is not, I'm not referring, although there are Erikson stages of development, which are really, in my opinion, wonderful, and we can apply those stages of development to our adulthood. I'm not referring to some body of knowledge that you have to Google and research and figure out what the stages of development are. I'm empowering you to be creative, to get a piece of paper and a pencil and write down, well, what are your stages of development? What if you had to design, What does a person need to learn to grow? What skills does a person need to integrate in order to have higher functioning, mature awareness and to stay grounded and rooted from that expansive place of mind? What are those skills? What is that process? And so you can map this out yourself. You can get a pen and paper and, create bullet points and begin to think about from your very specific situation. Because of course, I don't know, other people, no one really knows what you need. I'm a big fan of self-directed healing. I'm a big fan that you're in the driver's seat. And even in the phrase self-directed healing, to be consistent with the point of this video, self-directed healing means conscious maturing. That's what self-directed healing is I choose to engage in the conscious development of myself, the conscious development of my relationship skills, the conscious development of my mind, the conscious development of my maturing. And although I haven't used the word adult up to this point, let's introduce the word adult. So how do I move from those really painful places when I enter child mind and I'm moving into more my adult mind, I also like to use the phrase my resourced self. There's also different modalities of healing, and even certain spiritual practices refer to it as wise mind. How am I tapping into and dropping into my wisdom center, my wisdom self, my wisdom mind, and the practice, the ability to access, to lead from a place of the wisdom mind. Well, that's my maturity. That's what it means to mature. If I can at least access that, if I begin to have the skill to look at, well, how do I drop into that more expansive thinking, thinking that has less rigidity, thinking that has a bit more openness to it. My disciplined choice, my disciplined practice to nurture and cultivate mature mind, to nurture and cultivate wise mind, that in and of itself is the evolution of my development. That's how I know I am maturing. So this video is encouragement. I'm acting as a cheerleader. Go, go, go. You can do it. You're doing great. And begin to hold consciousness of when you slip into your immature child mind, your younger self, who really just needs some comfort then. When that happens, then that's the intersection of inner child work. And I have a series of videos on that. That's the moment that you sit with your 5-year-old self and, oh, that little boy or that little girl is so scared and so afraid and feels left out and feels isolated and feels he or she doesn't belong and feels rejected and feels like there's not security in this world, does not feel safe. It's in that moment through your mature self, through your, I also refer to it as your inner healer, your inner therapist. It's your observer self, the wise mind, tapping into wise mind, the mature, using a mature outlook is your observer self. And when you know this younger part of yourself has been triggered and activated and is very upset, that's when we swoop in and we cradle that part of ourself. We really pile on the gentleness, pile on the compassion, pile on the kindness, and say, and talk ourselves through, I'm going to get through this. I'm doing okay. What do you need, younger self? How do I help you? So in the same way that we're offering comfort to that younger part when it gets really triggered, we're going to do the opposite for our current adult self, to shore up our current adult self and give praise and give encouragement. Say, you are maturing, good job. And go ahead and be very specific about it. Write down, what are you learning, what have you learned, and what you need to learn next. And as long as you're committed to that process of personal growth and committed to that process of raising your consciousness, all in the service of having the skill to work with the pain of suffering, to work with the cessation of suffering. That is very noble. That is very sophisticated. That is very complex. And at the same time, that's what it means to mature. You're maturing. So good luck in this process. Please leave a comment here about how it's going for you, what you're learning, what you notice about your maturing. And also, if you like this video and would like to see more just like it, please subscribe to this YouTube channel so you'll be alerted immediately when I post a new video. And then lastly, to give you the heads up, I am creating a membership website, a membership social networking site that is a community. It is community-based of like-minded people similar to yourself who value relationships and want to talk about relationships. And it's within this community, this online community, that we are going to have these conversations and be able to explore some of these ideas. The name of that program is the same name as these videos, which is called Improve Your Relationships. And if you would like more information about that, you can go to my website, and on the community page, you will find that information. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.